الو. الو.
يا نديم، ازيك يا
علي،
مازن؟ عامل
ازيك؟ اخبارك ايه؟
ايه؟ كله حلو.
I cannot share my video because the host has stopped it.
لا، ثانية واحدة. ازاي الهوست يعمل كده؟
ادينا كده واحد فيو كده قبل ما نبتدي يا علي.
يا جماعة والله انتوا ترى يعني تنوروا المكتب في أي وقت، والله إن انتوا لو عايزين تشتغلوا هنا تحت أمركم والله في أي وقت. أنا مش عارف ازاي. ثانية واحدة يا مازن بعد إذنك. ممكن تجرب تاني كده يا مازن؟ مازن سامعني؟
اه بس لسه برضو I cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
طيب معلش، طب ثانية. مازن، طب ممكن تجرب كده؟
اهو.
ظبطت. عامل
شايفني؟
ايه؟ كيفك يا فندم؟ You look
اخبارك ايه؟
amazing. كل حاجة
والله
الحمد لله، انت عامل ايه؟
والله انا في الهند والله ومفشوخ. حاجه
ربنا يكون في
يعني
عونك
صعبه.
والله. ربنا يكون في عونك والله، احنا مقدرين جدا ان انت موجود معانا النهارده. Thank you so much والله. انا عارف قد ايه في وسط الزحمة بتاعت الرحلة ممكن تكون الموضوع ده صعب. thank you
لا, it's
thank
my
you.
pleasure. It's my pleasure بس I wasn't able to put anything on paper, so we'll have a nice conversation on it.
طبعا طبعا، من غير اي
انت
حاجة
عامل
خالص.
ايه؟
احنا
حبيبي.
اللي بنعمل سلايدز يا مازن، مش اللي تعمل.
يلا فين السلايدز طيب عشان امشي وراها.
احنا بس مستنيين كده الناس ابتدت تيجي اهي. احنا بس الميعاد بتاعنا بيبقى الساعة 6. فلو انت عايز في ان انت لو عايز تحضر اي حاجه قبل السيشن، احنا هنبتدي اون تايم على طول. فانا برضو
انا
موجود
معاك.
معاك دلوقتي. لو محتاج مني اي حاجه اعمل اميوت وكلمني وهتلاقيني موجود.
ثانك يو.
كويس. مازن؟
علي.
احنا خلاص لايف. يعني احنا لايف دلوقتي. خلينا نبتدي. طيب. اهلا بيكم يا شباب. يا رب تكونوا بخير. انا عارف ان احنا كل مره كنا بنخش الحلقه الجو كان بيبقى برد. وكالعاده يعني على غير العاده النهارده الجو حلو ونقدر نتعايش فيه. غير الاسابيع اللي فاتت احنا كنا بنخش الصراحه الحلقه وكانت ما كناش حاسين باطرافنا من كتر ما الجو كان بيبقى برد يعني. فخلوني ارحب بيكم النهارده في ثالث سيشن لينا في الانفستمنت سكول مع شركائنا في فينتك ايجيبت والبنك المركزي المصري. واللي مبسوطين ان احنا مبسوطين جدا ان احنا شغالين معاهم على البروجكت ده وغيره من المشاريع اللي بنحاول كلنا نستفيد بيها. خلونا برضو كده افكركم بالناس اللي اول مره تكون معانا. ان احنا في الوانتر سكول ان شاء الله هنكون معانا 5 حلقات. هنكون يعني طبعا زي الفينتك سكول بالظبط، بس هنا هنكون مركزين اكتر على الاستثمارات وهنحاول نغطي اهم الجوانب اللي في السيكتور ده واللي ليها علاقه بالشركات الناشئه. هيكون معانا النهارده مازن نديم من فاونديشن فينتشرز. مازن يا شباب من الشخصيات اللي يعني الصراحه اللي تركيزها على شغلها كان مصدر الهام ليا. يعني انا متاكد ان النهارده كلنا هنطلع بحاجات كتيره متعلمينها في السيشن دي، واللي هنركز فيها على الترندز في الفي سي اندستري عامه يعني وازاي اتابع الترندز اللي موجوده في الماركت واستخدمها لصالح الشركه بتاعتي في ان انا افتح يعني ابواب جديده للشركه واكبر البيزنس بتاعي ان جنرال. مازن مبسوطين جدا ان انت معانا النهارده. انا عارف انك مسافر دلوقتي وفي فرق توقيت ومع زحمه الميتنجز بتاعتك وكل تفاصيل الرحله بتاعتك، احنا مقدرين جدا وجودك معانا النهارده وكلنا متحمسين ان احنا نسمعك.
ازيك
اخر
يا
حاجه.
علي؟
ازيك يا
اتفضل
باشا؟
جو اهيد، اخبارك ايه؟
كله تمام. انا بس هدي ريمايندر بسيط وهديك الفلور. اخر
حاضر.
حاجه بس يا شباب، افكركم ان احنا الاسئله بتاعتكم لو عايزينها بليز سيبوا الاسئله بتاعتكم في الشات بوكس وان شاء الله هسالها لمازن كل ما يكون في فرصه. شكرا جدا يا مازن، انت بقيت معانا النهارده.
طيب ازيك يا علي؟ عامل ايه؟ وازيكم جميعا؟ اخباركم ايه؟
حبيبي.
أم... طيب انا الاول هعرفكم بنفسي. انا I'm gonna keep this in English عشان انا شايف في الاتنديز في كذا English speaker.
طبعا.
طيب في الأول كده I'll just introduce myself and introduce Foundation Ventures. Excuse any sort of distortion in the sound. I'm currently in India, so I'm jumping in from Bangalore, which is the sort of the Silicon Valley of India, and I'll tell you about my experience there during the call. أنا personally I'm an investment banker by profession. I started off my career in EFG, then moved to the buy side, which I was working on. Hi, nice to meet you. أنا شايف في comments تحت. uh,
دي من الحاجات
um,
الحلوه في السيشنز بتاعتنا. It's very interactive. ف
amazing.
اتفضل.
فأنا I moved to the buy side. I was operating a boutique private equity firm, and then decided that I wanted to go earlier in the value chain and basically support businesses from the ground up, basically being able to put proper governance in place and having the proper sort of infrastructure or the foundation layer into the startups that we invest. سريعا على Foundation Ventures. I don't know how much you guys are familiar with the firm. We are a very low key sort of investor. We do not like to sort of make too much sound and PR. But we are a very early stage VC firm based out of Egypt. Our main mandate is Egypt, but we do have a secondary focus on the GCC, with Saudi and UAE being sort of our secondary focus. We pride ourselves by trying to be sort of very early stage investors, first checks into businesses that we make investments in. And the way that we operate, and we've embedded in our DNA sort of a very sort of value added approach. So the way that we do sort of our investments is by looking at how we can potentially add value to these businesses. And if we do see that there is a value creation that can take place, only then do we make an investment. The way that we structured the fund is it's all private capital. We've hand selected sort of industry leaders within their respective fields, and accordingly, we're able to sort of leverage the resources of these industry leaders and plug them into the portfolio companies we invest in. Creates a very sort of accretive way of investing where you have the legacy sort of businesses having a very close look at the disruptive businesses that are coming out, while the startups or our portfolio companies have the ability to basically plug into these legacy businesses and get sort of an unlimited amount of value add. I will leave it here. If you, I don't know if we're going to open up to Q&A or we want to jump straight into the discussions themselves. Ali, how do you want to take this?
No, yeah, of course we can start the topic right away. وبعد كده the conversation, once we start the conversation, the Q&A will start popping up.
Sure. Anna, firstly, I would like to apologize for not putting any sort of slides or anything on paper. Anna, I'm currently, زي ما قلت لكم, I'm in Bangalore, which is in India, Silicon Valley of the East. And throughout sort of my 4 days here, صراحة, I've been building up so much more conviction on what we can do in Egypt and what our ability to build a very strong sort of tech ecosystem in the country. The reason I'm saying this is because if you look at where India is today in 2021 versus where they were in 2016, I think you can draw so many similar parallels to where we are as a market in terms of Egypt today. If you look at when they minted their first sort of tech IPO, it was back in 2016. احنا النهارده we are very much in a very similar position to where they are back then. When you look at very high level metrics about the country, they used to have less than a 40% banked population. They used to have obviously a 1.8 billion individual population. But as an overarching sort of theme, if you look at where they were back in 2016 till today, you find that we can draw so many similar parallels. To take that into more context, and this is something that I would love for everyone to sort of very much focus on. النهارده we have البنك المركزي has been sort of putting together an initiative around the IPN, the Instant Payment Network. If we look at the IPN of sort of what's happening in India today, هم كان عندهم حاجة اسمها UPI, and UPI completely transformed the fintech industry in India. They were able, since 2016, when UPI really came into sort of into effect, they were able to transform their economy from that 40% unbanked population to النهارده they're north of 85% banked population. The UPI, which back then, go ahead, Ali.
Mazen, can we please just explain what is the UPI والterminologies اللي ممكن نستخدمها, ممكن explain عشان بس كلنا نكون on the same page.
هو UPI is في الهند, it's the Unified Payments Interface, which is basically for مصر is the IPN, which is the Instant Payment Network. Just بملخص سريع, the Instant Payment Network is basically a network that's going to be initially the 6 largest banks in Egypt, and they are going to create a sort of unified, interoperable network that will allow other fintechs to connect on them and make transfers happen instantly. What happens there is that بعد كده مثلا everyone's hearing about sort of the neobank-like models, the Clever, the Tildas اللي طالعين دلوقتي في السوق. What that's going to really allow them to do is have that peer-to-peer transfer. بعد كده you're talking about on the B2B supply chain, you'll be able to make payments to merchants instantly. That creates a level of credibility that we don't have currently today. for that T+0 sort of payments that hit instantly, that's what the IPN in Egypt is going to sort of create. That's sort of the acronym for instant payment network. فاللي انا كنت عاوز اركز عليه النهارده is basically this sort of effect that's going to take place within the next 4 to 6 months once IPN hits the market. This is something that I would love for everyone to really study. If you look at Pakistan, في واحدة اسمها راست, في تركيا اسمها فاست. These are the instant payment networks of these other markets, and this has completely transformed the fintech economy in these spaces. This is just a hinter for you guys that are interested in fintech. But given that this is fintech Egypt that's sponsoring this event, and I was asked to come in here by the central bank, فأنا قلت بالمرة I give them sort of I give them sort of I command them for really being forward thinking في الحتة دي, because this is going to completely transform sort of where we are today from a fintech place. That's sort of on a high level with regards to changes in the regulatory framework that's happening from a fintech perspective, and this is. Do you want me to answer these questions يا علي ولا في الآخر؟
خلينا في الآخر هنجمع كل ال questions مع بعض.
بس عمر, answering quickly, yes, that is our IPN coming up. But just to give you برضو a little bit more context into the UPI. UPI has built a tech stack around sort of their network that allows for these fintechs to really plug in and to catalyze sort of the progression of these businesses. And this is something that I think definitely the central bank and all the stakeholders involved are going to be working very much on, which is sort of building out the rails so that we would be able from there to sort of plug into the IPN and offer services and so on. This is from أنا مش عاوز برضو أخد too much time speaking about one sort of بالضبط, بس let me talk about fintech in general and where we stand today. احنا النهارده as you guys are all aware, I think fintech is sort of a very strong sort of access point to a lot of different industries. When I talk about fintech in general, I don't talk about fintech from a perspective of it being an industry on its own, as much as I do believe that fintech is embedded in every single industry. In order for us to reach sort of this financial inclusion that is our north sort of metric from a government perspective, as we would require that to be embedded in every single industry that we hope. النهارده احنا our unbanked population is around 65%. We're talking about credit card penetration, which is stagnant for the past sort of 5 years at a 3%. And we are in urgent need of the startups and hopefully entrepreneurs like yourselves to really come up and support this initiative of financial inclusion. النهارده the whole world is sort of parachuting into the market, looking at fintech opportunities. I know that you guys want me to talk about VCs and talk about sort of the investors in the market. بس we've seen an unprecedented amount of sort of interest and appetite from regional and global VCs coming into the market today. We've seen sort of the blue chip VCs like Tiger and Sequoia and A16Z, all sort of very sort of interested in the Egyptian market, especially in the fintech space. The reason being is that fintech is really sort of what's going to create that catalyst for everything else to follow. When we talk about fintech, we talk about it, or I like to talk about it in sort of the rails. That's sort of the infrastructure layer, which in my opinion is always going to be a very exciting industry to start off with. And that's what everything else is going to be built off of, right? احنا هنا we're talking, if you've seen the likes of Marqeta in the US, this is a CaaS sort of model, which is اللي هو cards as a service. This allows for other fintech players to basically be able to issue cards very quickly. احنا النهارده شايفين مثلا a lot of these sort of players are going and working on the issuance side, issuing cards. With a CaaS sort of model, you would be able to sort of expedite their entry into the market to less than sort of 45 days. The way that you do that is, Linta, you need some sort of a banking partner or BIN sponsor. You need a processor, and then you need sort of the fintech itself that provides these APIs and provides the service where other fintechs can basically plug into its back end and accordingly avail all these front end services through through its operations. So that's on one end, and then you have sort of the B2B and the B2C side. النهارده on the B2C side, زي ما احنا كنا لسه بنتكلم, we've seen several players like Tilda, like Clever. There's a few others. I don't want to not mention any, but these are all going through the process of getting their banking agent license, getting a banking sponsor, and then plugging into sort of a technology provider like MasterCard or Visa, and then having a processor, a local processor to basically be able to avail their services. This is going to be a lot more exciting, and it's going to have a lot more use cases once again the IPN comes in, because peer-to-peer is generally sort of their highest sort of use case at the moment, and that would really allow for these businesses to offer peer-to-peer. I don't want to, مش عاوز اطول قوي على حته ال IPN, but one other thing that's super important for us to recognize with IPN is, and this is generally going to transform sort of how things are done, is حته ال remittances. احنا النهارده we have a very large sort of population that are expats that live in the GCC and across the world, والناس دي بتبقى عاوزه تحول فلوسها back لمصر. النهارده with IPN, and this is a very plausible scenario, if IPN starts plugging in with sort of the global and regional banks, then this transfer that happens today through the analog methods through Western Union and so on can happen directly and instantly through this sort of IPN. آخر حاجة عاوز أتكلم عليها, اتفضل علي.
معلش يا مازن، هقطع كده بس عشان ما نعديش الحته دي كده. انا دلوقتي if I'm using Western Union or MoneyGram or any other platform, ايه الفرق ما بينها وبين اي بلاتفورم تانية بتشتغل بالاي بي ان؟ يعني ايه اللي هيخليها فارقه؟ الفيز بتاعتها اقل؟ ما كده كده برضه ويسترن يونيون بيتحول انستنتلي حتى مع.
هو اول حاجه with Western Union, انت النهارده محتاج تروح sort of to cash in the amount, صح? And then whoever the individual is that's receiving the amount would have to basically go to a Western Union and cash out the amount. I don't know if it happens T+0 today. I don't think it does. But what this would allow for you to do is النهارده احنا we're talking about the banked population. احنا بتكلم ال post hopefully this
You mean
happening.
zero commission?
Sorry?
You mean zero commission, zero fees?
It really depends, Ali. So the thing is, if this is a government initiative, if it's done through a government initiative and it's done through zero fees, this is very plausible. Some countries have done it as the rails from government to government or banks to banks, and with the zero fees, someone is going to have to pay. But in the end of the day, it could be done in a very efficient manner. Forget about the fees for now. If it's done through this sort of IPN that we're currently discussing. آخر حاجة بس regarding fintech is sort of the B2B side. And I think a lot of focus should come in from a B2B perspective, where efficiencies can happen on the supply chain side and so on and so forth. And النهارده most of our economy does not have access Yes, T+0 is instant transactions, correct. Most
قلت لك.
معلش انا اسف اللي انا I'm not providing all the lingo، بس لو حد سألني هرد على طول. الحاجة الأخرانية is اللي النهاردة in order for an economy to properly flourish, we need to have access to finance for all our businesses. فالنهاردة when it comes to access to finance, we have an issue currently with the banks that البنوك النهاردة are acting as centralized units. These centralized units are very much sort of in a collateralized format اللي هم النهاردة they do not they're not risk taking from من ناحية اللي هم يدوا credit للشركات، بالذات الشركات اللي هم بقى لهم اقل من 3 سنين that are not cash flow positive, that are not sort of within the criteria or the covenants of these banks. فالنهارده you as a fintech can get very sort of creative on the financial instruments perspective. If you look at companies in the West, مثلا for example like Pipe النهارده does revenue generating sort of financing a direction, meaning النهارده through your revenue they're able to provide you with financing. There's so many different ways يا علي اللي احنا we can really sort of provide financing options to sort of SMEs, mid-sized businesses, even startups that are non-dilutive. They no longer sort of have this equity sort of instrument where the businesses or the startups become highly diluted, and at the same time really provides them with the legs and the infrastructure to grow without it being a dilutive instrument. That's sort of what I have on fintech. I want to pause here and see if there's anything else that you guys want to talk about from a fintech standpoint, and then maybe we can talk about the VC landscape and what's happening there, and then we can move on to different industries.
Yeah, I think we had only one question regarding the meaning of UPI and RPN, and it's already taken care of. Rehan, thank you so much for answering the question. بس يعني ممكن نقدر نخش دلوقتي على ال VC sector بقى trends اللي فيها.
Sure. طيب انتوا اولا انا one thing that you guys wanted me to speak about was sort of the VC landscape and what these VCs are looking at today. From looking at that perspective, I think 2022 in general is going to be a very sort of exciting year for انا هبطل ابص على الاسئله لغايه ما نعدي. 2022 is going to be a very exciting year for the VC market in Egypt in general. Reason being is that we're seeing النهارده a lot of sort of the local VCs coming back live, and then you have a lot of new market players coming into the market, and then you have the regional and global guys that have a clear sort of mandate for Egypt. What this is going to create is a very much وانا مش مفروض اقول لكم الموضوع ده، بس it's going to create an entrepreneur side of the market. النهارده the entrepreneurs will have endless opportunities to raise capital. They will have endless opportunities to find the right partners. And what that's going to really allow for in the market is that VCs are going to have to be a lot more smarter in the sense of value add. They're going to have to require to be a lot more supportive across the board. And at the same time, it's going to really allow for the entrepreneurs to have a say in which VCs they would really want on their cap table. Obviously, the major trend again is fintech. Most of these global guys are looking at fintech. A lot of the regional guys have more of an agnostic sort of approach to investing. And speaking about us as foundation, we are definitely very sector agnostic. But again, we always like to look for opportunities that have a huge or a large TAM in general. تفضل علي.
ثانك يو مازن. يعني I think البوينت دي برضو حلوه قوي ان احنا نتكلم فيها دلوقتي. احنا دلوقتي we're talking about almost more than 1 billion or 2 or 1.5 billion dollars injected into the Egyptian market in the next 3 years. And I'm being very conservative. This is a very conservative number. لو هنتكلم على كمية الكابيتال اللي هي projected to be injected in the Egyptian market in the upcoming years. فاحنا هنا بنتكلم على البنفيتس دي، ان احنا هنا دلوقتي لازم تكون ال VCs more smarter in terms of adding value to the entrepreneurs والشركات عامة، وإن هم يشوفوا الديل سورسنج بطريقة مختلفة. خلينا نشرح الحتة دي برضو عشان ما نعديش عليها بسرعة. خلينا نشرح الحتة دي ازاي ممكن تكون للانتربرنورز مفيدة، وازاي الفي سيز هتبتدي بقى تبص، هتغير فكرتها او تغير نظرتها للماركت في الفترات الجاية.
Absolutely. I think that's a great question يا علي. بص احنا يعني this is يعني exactly what we've been sort of practicing from day one, which is really sort of embedding a value add into our sort of process. النهارده VCs in general لو اتكلمت مع اي sort of VC هيقول لك النهارده احنا we are going to provide you with X amount of support. This can come in the form of advisors, can come in the form of industry experts, it can come in the form of tech consultants, it can come in the form of business development and access to a large pool of potential sort of LPs or so on and so forth. The other part that's also very important is sort of the speed of execution. النهارده if you look at the likes of, I'm going to speak about global sort of VCs just so that يعني for context here, if you look at Tiger مثلا, they have embedded in their sort of DNA execution as being one of the most important elements for them. النهارده within 48 to 72 hours they should be in a position to have an initial view and give you an indication of interest as to whether or not they're interested in this business or not. What this does is it gives a lot of visibility to sort of the founders. النهارده للأسف الشديد what we're seeing, and this is something that should definitely be changed over time, is that founders waste a lot of their bandwidth, a lot of their time sort of working towards waiting for responses from VCs, waiting for sort of whether these VCs are interested in the business or not. And that has a very counterintuitive sort of reflection on the business itself. And then النهارده as a founder, you should be focused on operating the business. You should be focused most of your bandwidth on building the business rather than raising capital. From moving into a more competitive landscape of VCs will allow for these VCs to streamline their process. They will allow for them to be a lot more efficient in terms of their decision making, and accordingly that should prove to be very sort of beneficial for the founders that are in discussions مع VCs. So the first one that we talked about is sort of value add from a perspective of the stakeholders that they have around their sort of enterprise partners. The second one is from an efficiency standpoint and really being able to make decisions quicker. And the last one, I think, which is very important, and this is the next topic that I would love to discuss, is how they would be able to plug them and to bring sort of knowledge transfer from portfolio companies that they have in their regional, their global companies, and how that synergies can take place over time. If you're talking about مثلا a fund that has investments in India, and this is something that one of the main reasons أنا هنا is so that I can start drawing these sort of parallels between what's happening here, what's happening there. How can we sort of put our portfolio companies in contact with these unicorns that are being built out of India and the learnings and so on that these guys have been through. If they're able to achieve that sort of way of dealing and providing existing Egyptian startups with this sort of support, then I think overall the ecosystem is going to be a lot healthier. فthat's ردا على سؤالك عليه with regards to how VCs are going to be a lot more supportive moving forward. اخر حاجه نتكلم فيها from a VC standpoint is انه اكيد كل حد هنا عاوز يتكلم عليها is sort of the valuation standpoint. النهارده there's a very big debate about are valuations overpriced, are valuations underpriced, are certain industries sort of put on a pedestal that are overpriced and others that are not. And I think the way that you should always look at it is benchmarking to other markets. And that's what I sort of like to do. If we look at Naharda, what's happening in Egypt, and I'm going to be very completely frank, very honest. Naharda, you have all this capital fighting over a very small subset of businesses. Reason being is that there's a very small subset of businesses, and we're talking about 0.1% of businesses in Naharda, startups in Egypt, that are really sort of challenging the status quo, that are really sort of building businesses that can really sort of disrupt the market. فالنهارده these sort of crazy pre-seed valuations that you guys are hearing about, sort of the crazy sort of amounts that are being raised at this very early stage, is being really deployed in this 0.1% of companies. But what we're seeing right now, which is very exciting, is that the quality of deal flow across the market is significantly improved. Naharda, we're seeing a lot of sort of these high caliber tier one entrepreneurs coming back from the West. We're seeing a lot of guys leaving their corporate jobs, taking on the risk of starting their own businesses. And this is going to create a very healthy environment moving forward.
طب معلش يا باسم برضه خلينا الحته دي عشان مهمه جدا. هاوس يعني التالنت بول عندنا هنا وهاو سترونج ات از والامباكت بتاعه على الانتربرينور شيب سين. محمد، ازاي ده بيأثر على الدايركشن اللي الفي سيز بتروحه، وازاي بيأثر على الفالويشن؟ هل مثلا لما حد يكون معاه اكسبيرينس اكتر من حد، ده بيأثر على الفالويشن، بيأثر على الكريديبيليتي بتاعته مع الفي سي، بيأثر ازاي بيأثر على الشركه بتاعته جنرال، وازاي بيأثر على البرسبكتيف بتاع الفي سي على الشركه دي؟
لا معلش، قول لي السؤال تاني بس in shorter form.
ازاي التالنت، البايب لاين اوف تالنت اللي موجود في الماركت بيأثر على الفالويشنز بتاعت الشركه؟ هل لما يكون التالنت قوي ده بيدي كريديبيليتي اكبر للشركه، فده من ناحيه
understood. ماشي. بس بس احنا كVC investors in general, there are two main criteria that we look for when we're investing in businesses in a very early stage. To build very strong conviction over these businesses, there's two main sort of factors. If you're able to solve for those two, there's a lot more, but I'm just going to focus on the main two. النهارده we look at a TAM اللي هو total addressable market, وبنبص على التيم النهارده. If we're talking about a tier one team that has cohesiveness across the board, that has the right sort of previous experience, they have the right sort of grit, meaning that they're willing to go through sort of the difficulties and the volatilities of the market. These two collectively create a very strong potential business that investors will have very high sort of appetite on. When you couple those two sort of criteria together, and when I'm talking about TAM, احنا مثلا we look at a potential total addressable market in Egypt on its own that has a potential of at least $1 billion. فانت النهارده without looking at cross border, without looking at any sort of regional expansion, if this market on its own has a total addressable market of $1 billion, then this is a market that we would potentially be excited and interested in explore. So if you have these two criteria مع بعض, most probably I can guarantee you that you will have a lot of investor demand. This investor demand will come in the form of local, or we can start even earlier than that. We can start with angel, early stage investors, regional investors, and global VCs, all looking to potentially deploy capital عليك. What happens is as follows. انت النهارده you need X amount of capital to start the business. Let's say that's $1 million. If there's high conviction عليك and there's an excess demand on the business النهارده, in the sense that there's more capital that wants to be deployed in the business, this is what drives valuation upwards. I have a question here that is there a shortage of demand side versus supply side? That's not what I mean. I mean that النهارده from a demand perspective, there's a lot more demand going towards a very small subset of these businesses. Because there's, in my opinion, again, and I'm being brutally honest here, very minimal sort of companies solving these very large problems with very strong credentials across the board. فده ردا على السؤال. Yeah.
في سؤال تاني بيقول do you accept domain experts solo founders؟ أنا مش متأكد. You accept domain experts solo founders?
Okay, so we don't usually like single sort of founders, and this is again sort of a risk that we see, but we've just made an investment we haven't announced yet with a single based founder, and there is no rule of thumb for whether you're a solo founder or you have 4 or 5 co-founders with you on the team. As long as we do believe and we have conviction over what you're building, then we really are sort of comfortable making the investment whether you're a solo founder or not. Second question is, I meant it's the other way. Is there not enough demand for VC capital?
I think احنا ممكن نخش على الترندز الثانيه لو في توبكس ثانيه لغايه ما في حبه اسئله كمان تيجي.
Sure. احنا in general when I'm gonna speak on behalf of foundation here. احنا we're very sort of theme driven. The idea is ان احنا what we do is we sort of market map certain industries. We have a very good understanding of the pain points that are within these industries, and accordingly we become very proactive in finding these founders or these businesses that are solving these problems. So accordingly it allows us to build conviction very early on, provide them with early checks into these businesses that we invest in, and accordingly what we've been able to do over the past 2 years and a half is get and we've built very strong relationships with these regional and global VCs, and we bring them into a syndicate in order for them to sort of invest alongside us into consequent rounds. With that, I'm gonna walk you a little bit through sort of our portfolio and give you examples of why we've made these investments, and accordingly come out with sort of themes from an industry perspective. If that makes sense for you guys.
Please. Please.
فمثلا احنا اول investment عملناها كانت في Capter. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Capter. Capter is a B2B sort of marketplace for initially started off between FMCGs and sort of الإكشاك اللي موجودين في السوق. Their wedge was through financing. What they were trying to do was to sort of avail financing للإكشاك دول, and then sort of leverage this entry point to create a supply chain between the FMCG to the إكشاك. النهارده this company is doing a phenomenal job. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mahmoud Noor. He's the ex-COO and co-founder of Swivel, and he has Ahmed Noor, which is his brother, also as a co-founder and the COO. And this business has been doing a phenomenal job since we led their pre-seed round. I think they just announced recently a $33 million round, and I'm sure you guys are going to be hearing a lot of more positive news about them moving forward. But just
congrats on
for
that by the way.
Reda,
بقول لك مبروك على آخر deal. That's amazing.
thank you. لا هم الصراحة يستاهلوا. They're a phenomenal team, very driven, where they've built يعني not only an Egypt tier one team, but النهارده they have offices in India, they have offices in the UAE, and they're really building a global sort of team to solve this problem. When we come to look at this problem in Egypt, we're talking about a minimum. If we're just talking about the FMCG market, that's a $40 billion market on its own. You then start expanding on that, and you do some horizontal integrations into. They were just announcing they're going into sort of different SKUs. مش عايز احرق لهم هم بيعملوا ايه بس they're going into different verticals, and these verticals basically is just sort of increasing that TAM. النهارده when you come to look at from a supply chain perspective, being able to solve that sort of supply chain layer is a huge sort of problem that we have in the Egyptian market. النهارده there's inefficiencies that happen across the board. But if you're able النهارده to solve for some of these sort of inefficiencies in the supply chain, that's a huge business. So that's sort of one example of the first company that we invested in 2 years ago. Another company we invested in was NowPay, and we sort of led their seed round. NowPay is basically trying to solve for the issue of credit. النهارده انت زي ما احنا كنا شايفين credit card penetration from us is almost has been stagnant for the past sort of 5 years at this 3%. فالنهارده being able to provide employers or employees with access to this finance through the salary advances is a very interesting wedge into a much larger sort of picture, right? Once you provide them with this sort of financing, then you're able to create ancillaries من خلالها, whether it's through buy now, pay later, whether it's through sort of being able to provide them with ways to pay their utility bills and so on and so forth. We think that go ahead.
معلش ممكن بس سؤال سريع. أسامة كان بيقول في traction معين يعني what types of tractions to start looking at the businesses and you accept pre-revenue startups.
Absolutely. If you have a great idea and you are a solid team, I'll put my email out here. Please do reach out to us. We sort of we love working with founders and entrepreneurs at ideation stage. Most of these businesses were pre-revenue, were pre-anything. We supported them in putting together a solid sort of go-to-market strategy. We supported them in building out their pre-seed rounds. We've supported them in even putting together co-founders that have that sort of domain expertise, that have sort of different angles to the business that can support their business moving forward. Osama, answer to your question is definitely we are that sort of investors. We do come in pre-revenue, حتى potentially having a full MVP in place.
Okay.
Just moving into sort of other investments that we've made and building out on themes from there. مثلا we were the earliest investors. We put the first check into FlexStock. ما اعرفش انتوا لو سمعتوا عنها ولا لا, بس FlexStock is an e-commerce fulfillment player today, a category leader leading that sort of side. We've always been very excited about e-commerce and the prospects of e-commerce in the market. But the market is extremely nascent. لسه e-commerce hasn't really picked up in the way that we wanted, or we feel like from an overall market perspective النهارده. This has definitely been a huge over the past since COVID hit. This has been extremely expedited and has been a catalyst to the e-commerce market. بس احنا we were not in a position at that point to sort of back a direct e-commerce player. So what we ended up doing was we invested in Flexstock, which was that sort of infrastructure layer for e-commerce. From there, it gave us great visibility into sort of the single e-commerce players that are coming up live. We gave us sort of an understanding of the landscape of e-commerce in Narda. Waiting for your mail. Kevin will follow up on that. I promise. So yeah, that is just another example of Lehna. We looked for the infrastructure building out on a market that we see that will have huge potential, but is not yet there. So we came in from an infrastructure perspective and led their sort of pre-seed round, which at that time was the largest pre-seed round back before Tilda and then now Rabbit that we also were a part of. We led their pre-seed. Yani I'll speak about Rabbit and then I'll again open up the forum for a Q&A. But Rabbit was sort of the last investment that we made, and we also led their pre-seed round, us and GFC. I think what's very interesting about Rabbit and this whole craze about Q-commerce in general is not the 20-minute delivery. The 20-minute delivery is definitely, from a consumer perspective, a very interesting sort of value proposition, right? At any point in time, you can sort of order your groceries and get it within or less than 20 minutes. And I would hope everyone here tries it, because I can guarantee you it comes in less than 20 minutes. But I think the underlying assumption about Q-commerce is much bigger and greater than sort of the idea behind sort of getting your delivery or your groceries in 20 minutes. It's the underlying assumption that we sort of see here is building out these micro fulfillment centers across the country. Having this sort of footprint completely transforms the supply chain moving forward. In Tanharda, you have the likes of Amazon and these much larger blue chip players that that have these huge centralized warehouses, and basically from there they can do same day delivery. They can sometimes do faster delivery, but that's not available everywhere in the world. What this sort of model will be able to do in the future, and why there's a craze around the world. Narda, if you look at Turkey, there's Getter, it's a $6.8 billion business. عندك for Almania, there's Gorillas in less than 2 years of operations. They're a $2.8 billion business. عندك across the market, every single market, and there's a craze from investors in sort of that model. And I don't think it's, or the way that we see it from a thesis perspective, is not the idea of just the 20-minute delivery and the convenience factor there, which is definitely a huge plus, right? But it's the idea of creating this new era of supply chain where you have these decentralized sort of fulfillment centers across the country, and that will really allow you to avail across the board several different products to the consumer, and that's why we call it sort of e-commerce 3.0. I think we have a few questions here.
Yeah, we have multiple questions regarding
Sure.
if VCs are interested to invest in electronics and deep tech startups. Is this any of interest for you guys?
Okay, I'm going to be very frank here. And I think, obviously, across the globe, deep tech and looking at Web 3.0, looking at cybersecurity, and all these like major themes that are global trends is something that all VCs are throwing ridiculous amount of capital on. But I'm not against it, and I'm not saying that we cannot, as a country, leapfrog certain or disrupt certain technologies. But I think if you guys want me to be extremely sort of honest and frank, is that we have real problems in the country today from a very nascent, very primitive, very premature sort of industries that we currently have from a legacy perspective that need immediate solving before we look at sort of being extreme innovators of technology. The way that I like to see it is that we invest in innovative market technologies rather than innovative technologies, in the sense that being able to get or being able to understand market trends and product life cycles across different geographies and being able to take that and localize it to the market and seeing how that can sort of create efficiencies in legacy businesses and legacy industries in Egypt is really what we should be focusing on today. Definitely, if you come up with a very innovative sort of technology that is competing on a global level, then well and good, you'll definitely be competing on a global level. But I'm speaking about the general sort of consensus here is that we, one, do not have and we're not able to compete from a funding perspective on a global level. And accordingly, there are other people that are building or looking at deep tech, looking at today I was just meeting with a unicorn and the CEO that built a biotech business out of India. They've burned through billions and billions of dollars in R&D, and these guys have not even yet went out to market, and they are a unicorn business. I do not think that today we have the ability and the funding to be able to take on these giants from a funding perspective. So if you're asking me what we look for, no, we're looking for businesses that are solving real issues that are facing these legacy businesses today.
Perfect.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you so much. طب احنا في برضه يعني questions started to pop up. I'm trying to read them as quickly as possible. طب في سؤال تاني على loyalty programs. ايه اللي بيخلي loyalty programs ليك appealing? Is it the business model ولا technology ولا unit economics بتاعتها؟ ايه اللي بيخليها appealing في early stage بتاعتها؟
But from loyalty programs in general have very different wedges into the market, right? So there's very creative ways for you to enter the loyalty program space in general, and each one of them has its perks and its benefits, and others that have their disadvantages. But in general, loyalty, in my opinion, is sort of an entry point to several ancillaries that come from it for monetization purposes and so on. But if you look at loyalty and you being able to provide a very unique value proposition that has defensibility, that has potential for sort of monetization in the future, that's very exciting. If you can build traction through users and that traction will allow you in the future to sort of monetize, then that's something that is exciting. My issue with loyalty programs in general is that they're all very much the same. Everyone is doing the exact same thing over and over again, just trying to be better at business development. They're trying to have some sort of very minimal sort of differentiator. And again, this is becoming very diluted. لو بصينا النهارده على حد زي Lucky, which started off in a very similar format, النهارده because they've been able to build tremendous sort of traction, they're going into several different ancillaries, from financing to consumer sort of cards to so many different offerings, because they were able to capture the consumer. So if you're taking my opinion here, it's try to build something that has defensibility, that has significant potential for traction. And then once you have that traction, have it in the back of your mind on how we can sort of monetize on that in the near future with healthy unit economics moving forward.
حلو جدا. Thank you so much. طيب في سؤال عن الهيلث تك والإد تك في مصر، هل هم لسه من الترندز اللي موجودة زي زمان ولا خلاص الفinTech جت مسحت كل الناس؟
لا بص there's in every single industry we're very fortunate صراحة ان we are in the beginning of a, a crazy sort of spree that's going to happen across all markets. We're not only talking about fintech, we're talking about now we're 100 million people that need a quality education, that need cheaper sort of education, that need ways to access markets that are gray today, that are not able to access quality education. But definitely education is always going to be a major theme, as long as we haven't yet figured out how to get our whole population to have proper sort of literacy rates, to have proper sort of education, then we're always going to be looking for right ways to sort of solve that problem. النهارده I was talking to another, يعني معلش I'm always going back to sort of my experience in India, but النهارده I was actually talking to another sort of company that that became a unicorn in the Indian market through edtech, and their entry point was very similar to a company that we have as an investment. We've invested in اسمهم Abweb. Abweb started off as a Jordanian-based company, now in the Egyptian market and several other markets. And the idea of having quality sort of content, and that quality content allows you to not only recycle, but this is inventory, this is assets that you have long term. This is very important in Narda. A lot of edtech we're doing it through peer-to-peer, but when you come to sort of if you've ever been on any of those platforms, the quality of the offerings is very sort of primitive. But Narda, a lot of these edtech players are looking at ways to sort of create quality content at a cheaper or economical value. These are all things that are happening across the globe they're very exciting.
Perfect. طيب في ناس سألت برضو عن الادتك اندستري في مصر. هل دي برضو دي ثينك ان هي من الحاجات، وفي ناس برضو سألت على الكيو كوميرس سبيس. هل هي حاسس ان السبيس بقى كراودد في مصر، ولا لسه في سبيس ناس او روم للناس او بلايرز تانية ان هي تخش الماركت؟
في الكيو كوميرس سبيس I think the market is huge. If you look at it today from a perspective of the existing players, عندك واحد زي Breadfast that has raised significant capital, عندك واحد زي Rabbit that has also raised significant capital, that have significant traction, that have a very strong offering. But I don't think that in general it's a saturated market. I think these players are still only scratching the surface. And if you come in with, and again, I shouldn't be saying this given that I'm an investor in Rabbit, yani, but I think if you come in with a differentiated strategy, if you come in and you're able to create a proper sort of model that that reduces the churn, that creates sort of higher adoptability, then you could very easily win. And I think that's what everyone, the likes of the Rabbit guys, I'm sure Breadfast as well, they're all trying to solve for that problem.
ايه والله. يعني
ايه
مازن
تاني؟
انت اجاباتك على طول
مش عارف
ايه
ريد تك ده معلش مش عارف ده ايه.
ولا انا مش عارف الريد تك. لو ممكن تشرحوا لنا يا جماعه ايه هي الريد تك نبقى شاكرين جدا. طيب اي ثينك احنا كده كل الاسئله دي كده احنا جاوبنا عليها. ممكن انا عارف ان احنا دلوقتي خلصنا الوقت بتاعنا، فلو ممكن في اي اسئله تانية please share it with us through email، وانا make sure ان انا برضو تسيركيليت كل الكويستشنز اللي هتجيلنا مع مازن، بحيث برضو ان هو لو عنده وقت لو ممكن يا مازن تجاوب لنا على الاسئله دي.
Sure. أنا كمان as promised I just put up my email. Anyone that would like to reach out to me with an idea, with a business model, and they want to have a back and forth conversation, I'm really happy to explore these ideas and see how we can take them to market. Ali, again,
Thank you.
I really enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Likewise.
I really appreciate what you're doing in the ecosystem today, and being a sort of a prominent stakeholder in everything that's happening today. Again, thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to having a lot more of these in the future.
Thank you so much يا مازن. ان شاء الله دي مش هتكون اخر مره نعمل سيشنز مع بعض، والمره زي ما قلت لك we're very happy to have you today. وبرضه زي احنا again thank you so much ان انت دخلت معانا برغم التريب بتاعتك. احنا عارفين ان انت عندك حاجات كتيره بتعملها هناك. Thank you so much everyone. وإن شاء الله طبعا النهارده I really enjoyed إن أنا كنت معاكم وكنت مع مازن طبعا. فإن شاء الله نشوفكم الأسبوع الجاي في نفس الميعاد، وما تتأخروش علينا المرة الجاية. Thank you so much.
Thank you everybody. Take care. Bye.